The coffee mug sitting on my kitchen counter that Tuesday morning in December wasn't mine. I stared at it for a full minute, my nurse's brain automatically cataloging details. Pale blue ceramic with tiny roses, lipstick stain on the rim, a shade I'd never worn. Still warm. My shift at Charlotte Presbyterian had ended early due to a system glitch, bringing me home at noon instead of my usual 3 o'clock. Corbin's car was in the driveway, which made sense since he worked from home. But this mug? This didn't make sense at all. "Corbin," I called out, setting my purse down carefully. The house felt different. Not just quiet, charged, like the air before a thunderstorm. No answer. I'm Bellamy Nash, 34 years old, and I've been married to Corbin Morrison for 8 years. We live in a beautiful colonial house in Myers Park, one of Charlotte's nicest neighborhoods. I work the morning shift at the hospital, usually leaving at 6 a.m. and returning by 3 p.m. It's a routine that's worked for us since we bought this house 5 years ago with money I inherited from my grandmother. Corbin handles our finances from his home office. He's a certified public accountant, methodical and reliable. Or so I thought. We'd planned our life carefully. No kids yet, but someday. A good marriage, or what I believed was one. But that mug changed everything. I moved through our house like a detective, suddenly noticing things that had been nagging at my subconscious for weeks. A pillow on the guest room bed that seemed fluffed differently than I remembered. The faint scent of perfume in our hallway. Something floral and young that definitely wasn't my usual vanilla fragrance. Our spare bathroom had been used recently. The hand towel was slightly damp. "Corbin?" I called again, louder this time. "Down here, babe." His voice drifted from his basement office, casual as ever. "You're home early." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I stood at the top of the stairs, gripping the banister, trying to process what my gut was screaming at me. Someone had been in our house. Someone who drank coffee from delicate mugs and wore pink lipstick and used our guest bathroom. When I finally went downstairs, Corbin was exactly where he should be. Seated at his desk, multiple monitors displaying spreadsheets, papers scattered in his usual organized chaos. He looked up with that familiar smile, the one that had charmed me 8 years ago when we met at a hospital fundraiser. "System crash at the hospital," I said, studying his face for any flicker of surprise or guilt. "Came home early. Lucky me." He stood and kissed my cheek, the same routine we'd perfected over nearly a decade together. "Want some lunch?" I was about to make a sandwich. Everything about him seemed normal. Too normal, maybe. Like an actor who'd rehearsed his lines perfectly. "Whose mug is that upstairs?" The question popped out before I could stop it. Corbin paused for just a fraction of a second, barely perceptible, but I caught it. "What mug?" "The blue one with roses. In our kitchen." He laughed, but it sounded forced. "Oh, that old thing? I think it's been in our cabinet forever. You know how you accumulate random dishes over the years? But I knew every piece of our dishware. I'd registered for most of it myself for our wedding. That mug had never been in our house before today." "Right," I said slowly. "Must have forgotten about it." The rest of the afternoon passed in a strange fog. I went through the motions, changing out of my scrubs, starting dinner, chatting about our respective days. But underneath, my mind was racing. As a nurse, I'd learned to trust my instincts about when something was wrong with a patient. Those same instincts were screaming now. That evening, I called our neighbor Oakley Griffin on the pretense of borrowing sugar. She and her husband had moved in next door back in May. He was a commercial pilot, gone more often than not, and she seemed lonely. We'd exchanged pleasantries over the fence a few times, shared the occasional package delivery. When she answered the door, I noticed she was wearing pink lipstick. Bellamy. What a nice surprise. Her smile seemed genuine enough, but there was something in her eyes. A flicker of nervousness, maybe guilt. "Sorry to bother you. I'm baking cookies and realized I'm out of sugar." The lie came easily. "Of course. Come in, come in." Her house had the same layout as ours, but decorated in soft pastels and delicate furniture. Very feminine. Very different from my practical, modern aesthetic. As she rummaged through her kitchen cabinets, I casually scanned the counter. No blue mug with roses anywhere in sight. Here you go. She handed me a bag of sugar, our fingers brushing briefly. Her hands were soft, manicured, the hands of someone who didn't work 12-hour shifts in a hospital. Thanks so much. How's Marcus doing? Still flying those international routes? Oh yes, constantly. He's actually in Frankfurt until Friday. She tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. It gets lonely, you know? Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to have a husband who was actually home. The comment felt loaded somehow, like she was fishing for something or testing me. Well, Corbin works from home, so I definitely can't complain about that, I replied, watching her reaction carefully. Something shifted in her expression. So quickly I almost missed it. Recognition? Satisfaction? I couldn't be sure. You're so lucky, she said softly. A husband who's always there when you need him. Walking back to my house, that strange feeling in my stomach grew stronger. The pieces weren't fitting together yet, but I could sense the edges of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. That night, lying in bed next to Corbin as he slept peacefully, I stared at the ceiling and made a decision. I was going to find out who had been in my house and why. I was going to trust my instincts, even if it meant discovering something that would change everything. I just had no idea how much everything was about to change. The next morning, Wednesday, I did something I never thought I'd do in 8 years of marriage. I lied to my husband about my schedule. They called me in for a double shift, I told Corbin over coffee, watching his reaction carefully. Won't be home until around 8 tonight. That's rough, babe. You've been working so hard lately. His concern seemed genuine, but there was something else there too. Relief? I'll probably work late myself. Got this big client audit that's driving me crazy. After kissing me goodbye, the same peck on the cheek we'd exchanged 1,000 times, he disappeared into his office. I waited exactly 10 minutes, then quietly let myself back into the house through our back door. The silence felt different when you weren't supposed to be there. I crept upstairs and positioned myself in our bedroom, where I had a clear view of the street through our front window. If anyone approached the house, I'd see them coming. At 10:47 a.m., Oakley Griffin walked up our front steps like she owned the place. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched her produce a key from her purse. A key to my house. She unlocked my front door and stepped inside like she'd done it 100 times before. I sat frozen in my own bedroom, listening to footsteps in my kitchen, cabinet doors opening and closing, the familiar squeak of our guest room door. She was moving around downstairs with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where everything was. 20 minutes later, I heard Corbin's office door open, his footsteps on the stairs. Then voices, low, intimate, followed by what could only be described as the sounds of two people who were very familiar with each other. They were in my guest room, in my house, while I was supposed to be saving lives at the hospital. I wanted to storm downstairs and confront them right then, but something held me back. Maybe it was my nursing training, the instinct to gather all the information before making a diagnosis. Or maybe it was pure shock that left me paralyzed in my own bedroom, listening to my marriage disintegrate one floor below. The betrayal felt like a physical weight on my chest. 8 years of marriage, 8 years of trust, 8 years of building a life together. And he was throwing it away for our neighbor, a woman who could waltz into our home with her own key like she lived here. But it was more than just the affair that made my hands shake with rage. It was the casual violation of everything I held sacred. My home, my sanctuary, the place where I came to recover from the stress of holding people's lives in my hands every day. They'd turned it into their playground. After what felt like hours but was probably only 45 minutes, I heard movement again. Oakley's voice, clearer now as they moved toward the kitchen. I hate that we have to sneak around like this, she was saying. It won't be much longer. Corbin's voice, tender in a way he hadn't spoken to me in months. Once I get the divorce papers filed and we can move to Colorado like we planned, we won't have to hide anymore. Colorado? Divorce papers? My legs nearly gave out. What about the money situation? Oakley asked. You said she inherited quite a bit from her grandmother. North Carolina's an equitable distribution state. I'll get half of everything, including the house. Don't worry, baby. We'll have more than enough to start over. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning to steal my inheritance, the money my grandmother had specifically left to me because she knew how hard I worked, how much I'd sacrificed to become a nurse. She seems so sweet, though, Oakley continued. I almost feel bad sometimes. Corbin's laugh was cold, nothing like the warm chuckle I'd fallen in love with. Bellamy's too busy playing saint at the hospital to notice what's happening in her own house. She thinks everyone's as honest as she is. It's almost pathetic. Pathetic. The word hit me like a slap. This man I'd loved, supported, built a life with, thought I was pathetic for trusting him. Just remember, he continued, when this is all over, I need you to back up my story about her being emotionally absent. That'll help with the divorce settlement. They were planning to frame me as a bad wife to justify his theft of my inheritance. The sheer calculation of it took my breath away. I heard the back door close, then Oakley's footsteps across our yard. A few minutes later, Corbin's office door closed, and the house returned to its artificial normalcy. I sat on my bedroom floor for another hour, processing what I'd heard. The man I'd married wasn't just cheating. He was systematically planning to destroy me financially and emotionally. And our neighbor wasn't just some lonely woman having an affair. She had a key to my house, knew my schedule, and was actively participating in a scheme to rob me of everything my grandmother had worked her entire life to leave me. When I finally felt steady enough to move, I drove to Best Buy and purchased the most sophisticated home security system I could afford. Tiny cameras, motion sensors, audio recording devices. If they wanted to use my house for their sick game, they were going to do it under surveillance. That evening, when I came home at my usual time, Corbin greeted me with his normal routine. "How was your double shift, sweetheart?" The lie rolled off his tongue so smoothly it made my skin crawl. But I matched his performance. Exhausting. Lost 2 patients today. That part, at least, was true. Just not from today. I'm sorry, babe. You work so hard. He wrapped his arms around me, the same embrace that used to comfort me after difficult days. Now it felt like being hugged by a snake. Over dinner, I watched him carefully. This man who'd held me while I cried over patients I couldn't save, who'd supported me through nursing school, who'd promised to love and honor me until death do us part. When had he become a stranger? When had I become so blind? "You seem quiet tonight," he observed. "Just thinking about work stuff." I forced a smile. "You know how it is." But inside, I was thinking about something entirely different. I was thinking about justice, about making sure that when this was over, the right person would lose everything. They thought I was too trusting, too naive, too busy saving other people to protect myself. They were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. The cameras I installed worked better than I'd hoped. For the next week, I watched my marriage dissolve in high-definition detail. Oakley came over every Tuesday and Thursday at exactly 10:45 a.m., letting herself in with that key like she was coming home from the grocery store. They had a routine down to the minute: coffee in my kitchen, conversation in my living room, and then they'd disappear upstairs to my guest room for exactly an hour and 15 minutes. It was the conversations I recorded that really opened my eyes. By Friday, December 13th, I'd gathered enough evidence to destroy them both in court. But something Oakley said during their Thursday session made me realize this situation was far more complicated than a simple affair. "I got the bank statements you asked for," she told Corbin, her voice carrying clearly through my hidden microphone. "But Marcus is getting suspicious about me being gone so much when he's home. And honestly, I feel terrible about what we're doing to Bellamy. You're not backing out now, are you?" Corbin's tone turned sharp, almost threatening. "We had a deal, Oakley. You need that money as much as I need those documents." That's when it clicked. Oakley wasn't just his mistress. She was being paid to spy on me. But paid by whom? I spent my lunch break that day doing something I should have done months ago, researching my husband's business partnerships. What I found made my blood run cold. Morrison & Associates CPA had dissolved in September, just 3 months ago. Corbin's business partner, David Way, had filed a lawsuit claiming Corbin had embezzled over $200,000 from client accounts before disappearing with the money. But Corbin hadn't disappeared. He'd been sitting in our basement office every day, telling me he was working on client audits for a business that no longer existed. The pieces started falling into place with terrifying clarity. David Way needed to find that money to avoid his own legal troubles with their former clients. Oakley, married to a pilot who was rarely home and probably struggling financially, had been the perfect person to recruit. Get close to Corbin, gain access to his personal documents, find the hidden money. Except something had gone wrong with their plan. Oakley had actually fallen for Corbin, and he'd fallen for her. The professional arrangement had become personal, messy, complicated, and I was the fool in the middle, working 12-hour shifts to pay our mortgage while my husband planned to steal my inheritance and run away with his paid informant. But here's what none of them knew. My grandmother hadn't just left me money. She'd left me her sharp mind and her talent for strategic thinking. Grandma Rose had built a successful real estate business from nothing in the 1960s, when women weren't supposed to own businesses at all. She'd taught me that the key to winning any battle was having better information than your opponents. So I started gathering information. I called David Way's office on Monday morning, pretending to be a potential client who'd heard about his unfortunate business dissolution. Within 20 minutes, I had his whole story. Corbin had slowly siphoned money from client escrow accounts over a period of 6 months, covering his tracks by manipulating the books. When David discovered the theft, Corbin had already transferred the money to offshore accounts and claimed it was legitimate business expenses. I hired a private investigator, David told me, clearly desperate to recover the funds. Someone who could get close to him, figure out where he's hiding the money. But it's been months, and we're no closer to finding it. I didn't tell him his investigator was currently using my guest room for afternoon rendezvous with his target. Instead, I started my own investigation. As his wife, I had access to everything: his computer, his files, his personal banking information. What I found was a masterclass in financial fraud. Corbin had been stealing from his clients for almost a year, but he'd been planning this much longer. He'd opened accounts in 3 different states, created shell companies, even purchased property in Colorado under a false name. The man I'd been married to for 8 years was essentially a professional criminal who'd been using our marriage as cover for his crimes. The most sickening part? He'd used my nurse's salary, my perfect credit score, and my inherited money as collateral for some of his fraudulent activities. If the authorities came looking, I'd be implicated in his crimes through our joint financial accounts. But Corbin had made one crucial mistake. In his arrogance, he'd documented everything. Spreadsheets showing exactly how much he'd stolen, when he'd stolen it, and where he'd hidden it. Transaction records for the Colorado property. Even email correspondence with shell companies he'd created. He'd kept meticulous records of his own crimes, probably thinking his sweet, naive nurse wife would never be smart enough to find them. That's when I realized what I had to do. This wasn't just about catching an unfaithful husband anymore. This was about stopping a criminal who'd used our marriage to destroy innocent people's financial lives. I spent Tuesday evening, while Corbin worked late in his office, copying every single document he'd hidden on his computer. Bank records, property deeds, client account information, email trails, everything. I uploaded it all to a secure cloud storage account he'd never be able to access or delete. Then I did something that surprised even me. I called David Way back. "I have information about the Morrison case," I told him, "but I need guarantees that any innocent parties won't be prosecuted." "What kind of information?" "The kind that will get you your money back and put Corbin Morrison in federal prison where he belongs." The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. "Who is this?" he finally asked. "Someone who's been played by the same man who stole from you," I said. "Someone who's tired of being underestimated." We arranged to meet Thursday morning. Coincidentally, the same time Oakley would be making her regular visit to my house. But this Thursday was going to be different. This Thursday, I was going to turn the tables on everyone who thought they could use me, betray me, or steal from me. As I lay in bed that night, listening to Corbin's peaceful breathing beside me, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Not anger, not hurt, not even the desire for revenge. I felt powerful. They'd all underestimated the quiet nurse who worked too hard and trusted too easily. They were about to discover that still waters really do run deep, and some currents are strong enough to drown anyone foolish enough to test them. Thursday morning couldn't come fast enough. Thursday morning, December 19th, started like any other day in my carefully orchestrated charade. Double shift again today, I told Corbin over coffee, watching him try to hide his relief. The holiday season has everyone getting sick. Probably won't be home until 9 tonight. That's rough, sweetheart. I'll probably work late too. Got that big Colorado client project heating up. The lie rolled off his tongue so easily it was almost impressive. At 9:30 a.m., I met David Way at a small diner 15 miles from our neighborhood. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with the hollow-eyed look of someone who hadn't slept well in months. Mrs. Morrison? He stood when I approached, uncertainty written all over his face. Call me Bellamy. And yes, I'm Corbin Morrison's wife. I slid a manila envelope across the table. Everything you need is in there. Bank routing numbers, property deeds, shell company documentation, client account records going back 18 months. David opened the envelope with shaking hands. As he scanned the documents, his expression shifted from skepticism to amazement to pure rage. This is everything. How did you— My husband thinks I'm too stupid and too busy to notice what happens in my own house, I said calmly. He was wrong about both. Do you realize what this means? With this evidence, we can recover almost every penny he stole. The FBI will arrest him for federal wire fraud, money laundering, and theft from client accounts totaling over $300,000. I finished. Yes, I researched the charges. David stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You're turning in your own husband. I'm stopping a criminal who happens to share my last name. I checked my watch. In about 30 minutes, he'll be in my guest room with your private investigator, Oakley Griffin. I assume you'd like to confront them both together? The color drained from David's face. Oakley's supposed to be gathering intelligence, not having an affair with the target, planning to run away to Colorado with the stolen money. Oh, she's done both. I pulled out my phone and played a brief audio clip from yesterday's recording. Corbin's voice clear as day. Once we get to Denver and I transfer the remaining funds, we'll have enough to disappear completely. David slammed his fist on the table, drawing stares from other diners. She's been working with him this whole time. She's been lying to me for months. Actually, I said, studying his face carefully, I don't think she started out lying to you. I think she fell for him somewhere along the way, and now she's caught between loyalty to you and genuine feelings for him. The question is, what are you going to do about it? We drove separately back to my neighborhood. David parked 3 houses down while I let myself in through the back door. At exactly 10:45 a.m., like clockwork, Oakley used her key to enter through the front. I positioned myself at the top of the stairs, David hidden in my kitchen, both of us listening to the familiar routine play out below. Coffee, casual conversation, and then footsteps heading toward the guest room. At 11:15 a.m., we made our move. I walked into my own guest room like I owned the place, which, of course, I did. Corbin and Oakley were sitting on the bed, fully clothed but clearly intimate, her head on his shoulder as they looked at something on his laptop. They both froze when they saw me, guilt and shock written across their faces in equal measure. Don't stop on my account, I said conversationally. I was just wondering if you two lovebirds would like some coffee. Maybe some of those delicate rose-patterned mugs Oakley seems to prefer? Corbin shot to his feet, his face cycling through confusion, panic, and desperate calculation. Bellamy, what are you doing home? You thought I was at work, saving lives while you two planned your romantic getaway to Colorado. I smiled pleasantly. David, would you like to join us? David Way stepped into the doorway, and Oakley's face went white as paper. Hello, Oakley, David said, his voice deadly quiet. Interesting way to conduct an investigation. David, I can explain. Oakley started, but Corbin cut her off. Who the hell is this? Corbin demanded, but I could see recognition dawning in his eyes. His former business partner, the man he'd stolen from, the man whose life he'd nearly destroyed. This is David Way, I announced cheerfully. Your former partner, your current victim, and Oakley's actual employer. Did you know she's been getting paid to spy on you? Well, she was supposed to be spying on you. Instead, she's been playing house in my guest room and helping you plan your escape to Colorado. The room erupted in chaos. Corbin started yelling at Oakley, demanding to know if she'd been working for David all along. Oakley burst into tears, insisting she'd fallen in love with him for real, that she'd stopped reporting to David months ago. David started threatening legal action against both of them, but I just stood there, calm as a lake at dawn, watching my carefully laid plans unfold exactly as I'd designed them. The fascinating thing, I continued when they'd exhausted themselves shouting, is that you're all focused on who's betraying whom, when the real question is what the FBI is going to do with the comprehensive evidence I've already provided them. Dead silence. Corbin's laptop, still open on the bed, displayed his meticulously organized criminal records, the same files I'd copied earlier this week. You see, while you three have been playing your little games of deception and romance, I've been building a federal case. Wire fraud, money laundering, theft from client accounts, interstate transportation of stolen funds. The agents are quite impressed with how thoroughly documented everything is, Corbin. They said it's rare to see a criminal keep such detailed records of his own crimes. Oakley looked like she might faint. Bellamy, I never meant for any of this to happen. I was supposed to find information about hidden assets, but then I really did fall for him, and you helped him plan to steal my inheritance while you were falling in love? I asked sweetly. How romantic. Corbin had gone very still, his mind clearly racing through legal implications and escape routes. You can't prove anything. Those files could have been planted, manipulated. I pulled out my phone and showed him a text message I'd received 20 minutes earlier. Arrests scheduled for 6 p.m. today. Thank you for your cooperation. Agent Sarah Martinez, FBI Financial Crimes Division. 6 o'clock, I said, checking my watch. That gives you about 6.5 hours to figure out how you're going to explain this to your parents. Corbin went completely white. His parents, strict Southern Baptists who'd raised him to believe that honesty and integrity were the foundation of Christian living. You wouldn't, he whispered. Oh, but I would, I replied. In fact, I already did. I invited them for dinner tonight, told them we had some exciting news to share about our future plans. That's when Corbin Morrison, successful accountant, master manipulator, federal criminal, sat down hard on my guest room bed and put his head in his hands. The game was over, and we all knew who had won. At exactly 6 o'clock that evening, 3 things happened simultaneously. Corbin's parents, Harold and Margaret Morrison, arrived at our front door carrying a homemade apple pie and genuine smiles. 2 FBI agents pulled into our driveway in an unmarked sedan, and Oakley Griffin sat in her living room next door, visible through her window, holding a suitcase and crying. I answered the door wearing my best dress and my most gracious smile. Harold, Margaret, so wonderful to see you. I hugged them both, genuinely fond of these kind people who'd raised a son I no longer recognized. Come in, come in. Corbin's just finishing up some work calls. Agent Martinez nodded at me from the driveway. Our agreed-upon signal. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Bellamy, dear, you look lovely, Margaret said, pressing the pie into my hands. We're so excited to hear your news. Corbin was very mysterious on the phone. Through the window, I watched the second FBI vehicle arrive. 4 agents total, just as Agent Martinez had promised. They waited patiently on our front lawn while I served coffee and made small talk about Christmas plans and Harold's retirement from the bank. At 6:15, I called down to the basement. Corbin, honey, your parents are here. The silence stretched long enough that Harold started to look concerned. Is he all right down there? Just nervous, I said truthfully. This is rather big news we're sharing. When Corbin finally appeared, he looked like a man walking to his execution. His face was gray, his hands shaking slightly as he embraced his parents. Son, you look terrible, Margaret fretted. Are you feeling well? I'm fine, Mom. His voice cracked on the words. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. Agents Martinez and Johnson, we're ready for you now. Harold and Margaret turned in confusion as 4 FBI agents entered our living room, badges visible, expressions professionally serious. Harold Morrison? Margaret Morrison? Agent Martinez addressed Corbin's parents with respectful formality. I'm Agent Sarah Martinez with the FBI Financial Crimes Division. We're here to arrest your son, Corbin Morrison, on federal charges of wire fraud, money laundering, and theft of client funds totaling over $300,000. Margaret's coffee cup hit the floor, shattering on our hardwood. Harold reached for his wife's arm, his banker's instincts immediately understanding the gravity of what he was hearing. There's been some mistake, Harold said firmly. Our son is an honest businessman. He would never— Dad. Corbin's voice was barely a whisper. There's no mistake. What followed was 20 minutes of the most heartbreaking family drama I've ever witnessed. Margaret sobbing, Harold demanding explanations, Corbin confessing everything while FBI agents read him his rights. The theft, the shell companies, the planned escape to Colorado. He didn't mention Oakley, and I was grateful for that small mercy. As they led him away in handcuffs, Corbin looked back at me one final time, not with anger or hatred, but with something that might have been respect. I'm sorry, Bellamy, he said quietly. For all of it. I nodded, accepting his apology without accepting his betrayal. I know you are. After everyone left, the agents, the parents, the neighbors who'd gathered to stare, I sat alone in my living room for the first time in months without pretending everything was normal. 3 days later, David Way called to tell me they'd recovered $240,000 of the stolen money. The clients would get most of their funds back. Corbin had been denied bail and was looking at 5 to 7 years in federal prison. What about Oakley? I asked. Probation, community service, and a hefty fine. Her cooperation helped us recover additional funds. David paused. She asked me to tell you she's moving back to Oregon to live with her sister. Her marriage didn't survive this either. I felt a strange pang of sympathy for her. We'd both been married to lies, in different ways. The divorce papers were finalized in February. I kept the house, my inheritance, and my dignity. Corbin's assets, what remained after restitution, barely covered his legal fees. 6 months later, I still work at Charlotte Presbyterian. I still save lives, still come home tired, still drink my coffee from mugs that actually belong to me. But everything else has changed. I've learned that trust isn't the same as naivety, and that kindness doesn't require blindness. I've discovered that the quiet strength I use to help patients heal can also be used to protect myself from people who would harm me. Some evenings, when I'm watering my garden, I think about the woman I was before all this happened. She was softer, maybe more trusting, certainly more willing to ignore red flags in favor of keeping peace. I don't miss her. The woman I am now knows her worth, guards her energy, and doesn't apologize for protecting what she's worked hard to build. She's learned that being underestimated can be a superpower, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be destroyed. My grandmother used to say that life has a way of teaching us exactly what we need to know, exactly when we need to know it. She was right, as usual. I learned that I'm stronger than I ever imagined, smarter than anyone gave me credit for, and worth far more than someone who would betray me for money and a younger woman. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes the person who saves you is yourself. And that's a lesson worth every painful step it took to learn it.